What's up, everybody? Palumbo here, and in this video I thought I would do something a little bit different. So normally a lot of my videos are lessons or tutorials on how I use Google Apps Script to move data around, clean up data as part of my data analyst job. But in this video I actually thought I would show you kind of what it's like to be a data analyst. And I got a request from one of my clients. They've recently implemented a new time tracking system, and they're starting to see overlaps in the shifts of their workers. So they ran a query. This is the data that they got back, and they sent it over to me, and they said, hey, we just want to know, one, are there overlaps? Two, if so, how many? What's the total overlap time? And then what is the rate that we paid for that overlap time? Data analysts don't always work on huge jobs requiring, data lakes and data warehouses. Sometimes you just get these little requests. And I thought it would be sort of interesting to kind of show what it's like to get a request like this and just kind of work through it. Because part of this is going to be cleaning up some data. I'm going to have to be thinking through how I want to detect any overlaps. So I just thought it would be kind of interesting to show what it's like to sort of work, day to day with some of the requests that I get from some of the clients that I work with. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump into it, and let's actually just look at the data. So I can actually make this a little bit bigger. So we got 4 columns that we're going to work with. Column A looks to be the worker ID number. Column B is their clock in time, and notice the time format. So it looks like to be the date, in this case 2023 April 9th, separated by a T, saying that the rest is time, and this is 8:15 a.m. And hyphen, and then this is going to be the time zone, and it's represented I believe in GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. I think this is sometimes called a Unix timestamp, but you'll notice that timestamps that you actually get from computers or systems will typically look like this. This is how computers like to record and look at time. I personally, and I don't think I'm the only person who feels this way, this is not very useful to me. And also on top of that, working with dates and times in Excel can also be a little bit tricky and not a lot of fun. So that's why I thought this would actually be a little bit interesting. So B is their clock in time. C is their clock out. And then D is their, it's called override rate, but this is the rate that they're paid per hour. So once again, what the client is asking for is do an audit or analysis of this data. Determine if there are any overlap shifts. If so, how many? What is the total overlap time? And then what is the rate that we paid for that overlap time? So those are the questions that we need to answer. So let's jump in and start doing that right now. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I am going to, so this is the file that the client sent over. I personally never like to work with the original file. I always want to keep the original data preserved in case I need to go back and look at it, in case I just want to revert back to it. So I'm going to go here and I am going to duplicate. And I'm going to create this copy too. Notice I've already created one copy, but I'm just going to create another one that I can work with. So let's go ahead and open this one up and get it centered in the screen. Once again, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it's a little easier to look at. And then the next thing I want to look at here, which is to me the next most glaring problem, is I don't want to work with these time formats. I just don't. So I am going to insert some columns. And the first thing I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start breaking up these times. And I'm going to do that using, let's go to data in the text 2 columns, and I'm going to use delimited. And if we look here, the date and time is separated by a T. So I'm going to go ahead and say my delimiter is T. And let's bring these two over. So now we have the date in one column and the time in the other. This is good, but notice that the time still has the time zone as part of it, which I don't really want. So let's go back to text to columns. We're going to use delimited. And in this time, we're going to use a hyphen. And we are going to bring this over here. Okay, so now we have this broken up into 3, which I think is going to be a lot more useful. And I'm going to change the headers. So I'm going to call this in date, in time, and I'm just going to call this in GMT. And I don't need this one, so we can delete this column here. Now we need to do the same over here. So we're going to insert a few columns. Let's go through the same process. So delimited, go for T next, finish, we'll bring that over. I don't know why I'm getting that error. There's no data there. Okay, so now we have our date. Next, we need to get rid of the time zone. So we'll break it off at the hyphen. Yep, bring that over. Okay, so let's update the columns here, and I'm going to call this out date, out time, out GMT. I don't think I'm going to need these, so I'm going to actually hide these rows, the GMT rows. But I'm not going to delete them, because just in case I need to go back, or if the client actually wants to see what time zones these were happening in, that data is going to be available. I also don't need this column here. Well, I might, so I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, so let's look at what we have now. So we have the worker, we have the date they clocked in, the time they clocked in. Oops, still need to hide these, hide, and hide. When the date they clocked out and the time that they clocked out. The next thing I want to make sure that I'm looking at properly, and I am going to get rid of this row just temporarily, or this column just temporarily, is I want to make sure that as I'm working through this, these are in chronological order. And when I say chronological order, I want to make sure that, so if you look here, so for this employee, it starts on April 9th and then goes down to April 3rd and goes to April 4th. So these are kind of out of order. I actually want them from descending. I want them to go in chronological order. So I want the earliest date on top and then the earliest end time on top. So as I go through and I start comparing times, they're going to be in sort of a chronological order, and all of the employees are going to be grouped together. So the way that I'm going to do this, let's go ahead and highlight all of these, and let's go to sort and filter. We'll do a custom sort. And the first thing I want to do is let's sort by worker. I want to keep all my workers together, and A to Z is just fine. Then I want to sort by end date, and I want oldest to newest. Then I'm going to sort by end time, and then I want smallest to largest. So if we sort like this, and we get a sort warning, sort numbers in numbers stored as text separately, that looks fine to me. Okay, so now we have our workers in descending order, starting with the lowest employee ID first. This doesn't really matter too much, but I just want to keep my employee IDs together. But if we look at the dates, so we have 4343, 44, 46, 47, okay, 49. So these are actually going down in an order that I would expect or I'd want to work with. And then their end times. So for example, if we look at here, they have 2 clock-ins on the same date. So they clocked in at, I believe this is midnight, 0 hours. And then they clocked out at 7:02. They clock back in at 7 p.m. or 1900 hours, and then they clock out at 23:59:59. So here, if we're looking at the same date, let's see if we can find another one. Here we go. We got a couple of 4/8s. So I want to make sure that these are in chronological order. So midnight, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 1300, which is 1 p.m., and then 2000. Okay, so this looks to be the order that I want to work with them in. Excellent. Okay. Now that we have them in an order that I would say is chronological going down the sheet, now we want to start looking for overlapping shifts. And just to kind of give you an idea of the size of this particular worksheet, we have 43,839 columns. So now we want to start looking for overlapping shifts. And this is where we need to kind of start thinking of like, how do we do that? What's the best way to do that? The first thing that we need to do is it needs to be for the same worker. So we need to make sure that these are the same. An overlapping shift is going to occur on the same date. So these need to be the same. And then we need to, in order to see if two shifts are overlapping, this clock out would have to occur before this clock in order for these to be considered overlapping. So there's 3 bits of criteria that we would want to check for. And it's quite often that I'll just jump into like a text edit here, and I will actually type out the criteria. So I will just say like overlapping shifts. So 1, same employee. 2, same date. And then 3, previous day out time before next day in time. This just kind of helps me, typing things out, helps me kind of work through things. Plus, like what I'm actually writing the function, or if I'm working with Python or whatever, I have notes that I can just refer to. I don't always have to store everything constantly in my brain. Okay, so this seems to be what we're looking for. So what I'm going to do is, in column H, I'm going to write an if statement, because I am basically want to look if certain things are true. And it looks like there's 3 things that I need to look for. Notice I'm starting on row 3, because if I start on row 2, I don't have a previous day to compare. So I'm going to say if these 3 things are true. So I'm going to use an end. And the first thing I want to compare is that this worker ID equals this worker ID. That this day equals this day, and that this time is less than this time. I think that sounds right. If that's true, we have a problem. If not, I'm going to say it checks out. So, okay, so it's already coming out and it's saying that we have a problem, which already tells me we have a problem, because this doesn't seem to be correct. So let's actually look at our formula here. So if A2 and A3 equal each other, which they do, and the dates equal each other, B2, B3, and if this is, okay, so this actually needs to be greater than. So if this were greater than this, then we have an overlap. So I kind of reverse my logic there. So we're going to run this down. I'm going to call this one my check column. I'm going to go here. I'm going to use Control Shift L to create a filter. And I just want to start looking at like the problems. Okay, so we have all the problems. Here's the thing though, I need to be able to see the row above it in order to really determine if we have an overlapping shift. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to create some visual queuing with some conditional formatting, and I am going to use a formula, and I am going to say, and I always have trouble with these. So if H1 equals problem, then highlight the entire row in red. I think that should work. Okay, looks like it works. So let's go ahead and go put all these in here, and let's start looking for the first red row that we have. Okay, so let's see if our logic actually pulls out overlapping shifts. So here we have the same employee, we have the same day. The first shift is from midnight to 1600 hours, and then the next shift is midnight to 1600 hours. Okay, so yes, that is an overlapping shift. In fact, it's just a duplicate shift. So let's look at the next one. We got one right here. So same employee, same day, they worked from 0 to 1600 hours, and then same day, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock a.m. or 800 hours to 900 hours. So yeah, there's definitely an overlap here. If they're working from essentially midnight to, I believe this is 4 p.m. But during that same shift, there's another clock in from 8 to 9. That's overlapping time. So that looks like that checks out as well. Let's look at a couple more. So same employee ID, same day. They worked from 9 to 1300 hours, which is 1 p.m. And then 9 to 11. So yeah, there are definitely some overlapping hours here. So that is a problem. Let's jump down kind of towards the middle. We got same employee, we got same date. So they clocked in at 9, clocked out at 14:07. Then they clocked back in at 1400 hours and clocked in at 14:18. So it looks like there's a little bit of overlap here. So they were basically from 9 to 14:07, but from 14 to 14:18. So it looks like there's like 7 minutes, 46 seconds of overlap on this one. Okay, so it looks like the logic that I applied here is actually pulling out shifts that do have some overlap. So that's good news. So it looks like we were able to actually go in here and start detecting some of these overlap shifts, and we do have them. So the first thing I'm going to do here, just kind of for my own record keeping, is I'm going to do overlapping shifts. Let's bring this one over here, and let's count them. So I'm going to do a count ifs on my check column, and I'm looking for problem. And I got 1,032. So it looks like we have 1,032 shifts that have some degree of overlap, whether they're duplicate, whether it's just a few minutes, whether it's a few hours. So we've already answered the first question of the client is, do we have overlapping shifts? The next question we have to answer is, what is the total overlapping hours? So now we need to figure that out. So a couple of ways we can do this, and I'm going to be the first to say I am probably not doing this the most efficient way possible. And if somebody out there, knows a better way to do this, by all means, please let me know, leave a comment below. I will tell you right now that when I'm working with data specifically for a client that, and in this case specifically, and I think in 99% of the cases as a data analyst, any of the work that you do is going to hit your client's bank account or bottom line. I don't mind taking the extra steps in order to ensure accuracy or in order to show my work. If, a peer or my client wants to actually go and just double check my work, I want to be able to show them all of the diligence that I went through in order to make sure that I am providing them the most accurate analysis possible. So having said that, I'm going to do a couple of different things here in order to ensure that I am actually pulling out the right numbers for them. Okay, so we know that there's overlapping shifts. The next step is how much time. And I'm going to do this a couple of different ways because I think there's really only 2 instances in which we can actually see overlapping time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am just going to get a same day diff. So I'm going to call this one same day diff. And I am going to do, okay, so that would be 7 hours and 2 minutes. So also 2, just to keep everything the same. I'm going to make sure that the data or the information in this cell is going to be formatted the same way as this other cell. So I don't know if you saw what I did. Let me undo it. So the easiest way to do that is to simply highlight the cell that you want to copy the formatting. You can click on the format button here and then just click on the cell that you want to apply the formatting to. I do this quite often just to make sure that everything is as it should be. And let's go to, nope, we don't want to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this down. So yeah, this looks to be right. So in this case, they worked from midnight to 7:01:26. And so their shift is 7:01:26. Okay, so we have the same day diff. Now what I want to do is I'm going to do previous day diff. So since once again, my first row, I don't have a previous day, I'm going to have to start one row down. And I actually want to see, So from here to here, is that right? Let's do the same thing. Format. Some of these are going to be a bit wonky, and it's just the way that Excel handles time. I find to be kind of interesting. But let's actually look. Let's go back down to my first problem. So we know that this is same day diff. This is previous day diff. So in this case, this is a duplicate. We know this is just a duplicate shift, so it's going to be 16 hours no matter what. So that we're pulling in 16 for both. But let's look at another one here. Okay, so this one we know is not a duplicate. This is just two shifts that overlap. So this the first day, it was midnight to 1600 hours. And the next one is 8 to 9. So this is going to be 1 hour for same day diff, and this is going to be 8 hours. So from this one to this one. And it looks like the correct overlap is going to be the 1 hour from 8 to 9. So let's go look down here. Let's look at a couple more. So this person worked same day, 9 to 1300 hours, and then 9 to 11. So this diff is actually going to be 2 hours. I'm sorry, not the diff, but the overlap is going to be 2 hours, not 4 hours. So let's look once again. And we have, okay, same day. So they worked from midnight to 8:05 and then from 8 to 22:58. So here, this is a good example. So this kind of shows the previous day diff being the right answer. So they worked from midnight to 8:05 in the morning. And then the next time punch that we have shows them working from 8 a.m. to 22:58:03, which I believe is 10:58. So the actual overlap that we have between these two shifts is just 5 minutes. So it's this 5 minutes and 2 seconds that overlapped from this clock out to this clock in. So in this case, this is going to be our overlap time, the previous day diff. And notice also, and this is the lesser amount of time between these two. Let's just look at a couple more. So we have here, so it was from 9:30 to 1641, and then this was 1630 to 1800. So the diff is going to be between the 1630 and 1641, which is going to be the 11 minutes. The 11 minutes and 57 seconds. So this is going to be our overlap time, and it is the lesser number from the same day diff. We'll check out these last two. So they clocked in at 9:30, clocked out at 16:39, then they clocked in at 16:30 and clocked out at 1800 hours. So it looks like there's 9 minutes, 6 seconds of overlap time here. So we have that. And then we have over here, we have they worked from 8 to 1400 hours and then 9:45 to 9:49. Okay, so this is a really good example of kind of the opposite being true. So this, it looks like, let's just say this was their actual shift, 8 to, I believe this is 2 p.m. But somewhere in there was another clock in of from 9:45 a.m. to 9:49 a.m. So that little, it's 4 minutes and 4 minutes, 33 seconds. That is the overlap time. So, okay, we have these two columns, and it looks like every time we check it, it is the, if this is a problem, it is the lesser number that is the overlap time. So that's what we want to report as the number of hours that are overlapping. So the way we're going to do that is, it's going to insert here, and I'm just going to call this overlap time. And once again, not a good example, but I am going to say, actually, I'm going to start here on this one. So I'm just going to say if this is less than this, give me this, else give me this. And there's a number of ways you can do that. I tend to just defer to if statements because my background is a little bit more in writing code. You could use min if you wanted to, I believe. But I've always just, my brain diverts to conditional statements. So if this, then that, if this and this is true, if this or this is true, then do this, else do this. That's just the way that my brain works. Okay, so in order to kind of get a closer look, I'm going to go to my check column. Let's take out the check. I just want to look at the problems and let's see what we've got here. So lesser number, lesser number, lesser number. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I actually would like to take a closer look at this. So we're at row 766. So, oops, no, we want to clear here, and then let's go all the way down to 766. A little bit more. Here we go. Okay, just want to look at this one here, just to make sure I'm correct. So, same employee, same day, 1230 to 1435, 1430 to 1440. So yep, it looks like, well, in this case, it's, it is the 5 minutes and 34 seconds. Okay, so now we have the amount of overlap time. Admittedly, it's not in the prettiest format. If I wanted to do a little extra work, I could go here and only put a value in for when this equals problem. But at the end of the day, this isn't going to be a dashboard. I'm really just giving answers. So I'm not necessarily going to do that little bit of extra work. Especially because I can always go in here and just format these numbers. Or not format, but filter these numbers. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So we have these here. Let me go ahead. I'm going to insert another row. So now we need to answer the next question, which is how much overlap time did we see? Here is where I can get a little bit weird and tedious about how I actually pull out some of these numbers and some of this data. So let's actually, I'm going to insert another one, and I'm going to call this overlap hours, and it's overlap time, boom, and I need to change this to general. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is, so in this case, we have 16 hours of overlap, and let me go ahead and run this down. We're not going to have hours for every single problem row that we found. So we have 16 hours of overlap time here. So 16 hours, 1 hour here, 2 hours here. Here was only 5 minutes and 2 seconds. So there's no hours to report. This is 11 minutes and 57 seconds. So no hours to report. So these are just, I'm just pulling out the hours of overlap. And here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do overlap minutes. And I'm going to use minute here and make sure we've got the right format. Boom, we got 0. Let's run that down. So once again, if you look here, like we don't have any hours, but it's 11 minutes, 57 seconds. So I'm pulling out the 11 minutes, 12 minutes, 37 seconds, pulling out the 12 minutes. So I'm putting those in their own row. And I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to do next, which is overlap seconds. And I'm going to use second, go over the overlap time, give me the seconds from this one. It's 0. I want to make sure that we have the right formatting for that. There we go. Okay, so this is like a really good example row. So this was 11 minutes and 57 seconds. So we have 0 hours, 11 minutes, 57 seconds. Okay, so now we have all of that time broken up into the number of hours, number of minutes, number of seconds. Now let's just go ahead and just kind of pull this into sort of like total number of hours. So the way I'm going to do this is it's going to be this number plus this number divided by 60 plus this number, this number, and I actually need to do 2 of these because I want this number divided by 60 divided by 60. Okay, so 16 hours. So let's go ahead and pull this down. This is going to be a little bit easier to work with because I actually just want like a single number to represent the number of hours. Okay, so let's actually kind of look at what I'm doing here. So if we look at this first row, it's super easy. 16 hours is 16 hours. Here we have 1 hour is 1 hour. Here we have 2 hours is 2 hours. Here we have 5 minutes and 2 seconds. I want to know how much of an hour that is. And this is telling me it is 0.0838888889. That is the floating point representation of the hour. And the way that we can actually look at this is, let me pull up Alfred here. So we know we have 5 minutes. So that would be 5 times 60 plus 2. Oops. Plus 2. So we have 302 seconds, right? So we have 302 seconds divided by, I think it's 3,600 seconds in an hour. So 0.083888889. So this is why I'm doing it like this, because I actually just want to get a single number to represent the number of overlap hours for that particular problem row. And that's what I did. And it goes all the way down. And we could, kind of take a closer look here. We've got a number. So 45 minutes would be, 3/4 of an hour. So all of this seems to be checking out. So what we can do now, and then the next thing we need to do, so I'm going to put here total overlap time. Okay. I think the last thing that we need to do, one of the last things we need to do, we're getting really close to finishing up here, is we need to answer the last question for the client, which is how much did we pay due to these overlapping hours? So overlap rate paid, and that's interesting that did not. There we go. Okay. So now this is actually going to be really easy because we have their override rate here. So at this point, it is literally just this multiplied by that. So in this case, they paid $206.08. 1 hour was $10.05. 2 hours at $18 an hour is going to be 36. But this is where it gets kind of interesting. So in this case, where we only had 302 seconds of an hour, which is 0.083. Or let's call it 0.84. They only paid $1.17. So this actually shows like the fragments that they paid for the hourly rate. Okay, so now that we have this, let's clear our formatting. And so we have the number of overlapping shifts here. And we're going to do overlapping time. And I'm going to do a sum ifs. So total overlap time is my sum range. And my criteria is going to be this. And it is if it is a problem. So we have 468.76 hours of overlapping time. And then we need to know the overlapping rate paid. So overlapping rate paid is going to be sum ifs. This is going to be my sum range. My criteria range is going to be this check column once again. And once again, we're looking for problem. So the overlapping rate paid is $7,430.50. So that answers the questions for the customer. Yes, there were overlapping shifts. There were 1,032 of them. All of those equaled 468.76 hours of overlap, which caused you to pay $7,430.50 in the overlap rate paid. So this pretty much answers exactly what the client is asking us. The only other thing that I'm going to do here, just to kind of make this a little bit nicer, is I'm going to highlight this entire table of data, and I am going to insert a pivot table. Okay. And here's what I'm going to do. So my rows are going to be worker, overlap time, total overlap time, I will put as value, and overlap rate paid, I will put as value. And as a filter, I am going to use check. So, and then I'm going to filter for just problem. So the reason I'm doing this is because we have, if we look back at our data, like we have employees that could potentially have more than one overlapping shift. If my client wanted to know, if they just wanted to look at a single employee to see the total overlapping time and total overlapping rate paid, this pivot table is going to do it for them. And let me actually make this just a little bit bigger. So they could actually go look here and just say, hey, this employee only had 0.08 hours. We only pay them $1.17. But we can go search, or we can go through here and we can actually look at each employee, even if they had multiple overlapping shifts or overlapping rows. This just gives them the sum of the total overlapping hours and the sum of the overlapping rate paid. So what I would do next, and I'm not going to record it in this video because I don't think it would be useful, is I would obviously save my work. I would write up either an email, or if they're using a ticketing system, I would go into the ticketing system. I would take them kind of step by step how I did my work, and I would summarize my findings, and I would attach obviously this file to show to the client. I would either do that in an email, or if they asked me to show up in a meeting, I would do that, and I would probably put together just a deck with a couple of just snapshots and a summary and maybe some charts to show them exactly what my findings are. But I would say, pound for pound, like the work that I do with Excel, kind of working with data, it could be very large. I'm actually working on a project right now, which is extremely sizable. Which is, we're not going to work with it in Excel. We're going to work with it in a lot of other different larger tools. But it is really common to get some of these ad hoc requests where you can go in, you can write the query, pull the data down into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you could just go through in a spreadsheet like this and just kind of add some rows, do some math, put in some conditionals, and you would be able to actually get to answers pretty quickly. So I hope this was interesting. I hope this was useful. I hope that this kind of showed, how somebody who works with data on a day-to-day basis uses their tools. Once again, I'm not going to say this was the absolute best or the only right way to do it. So if you have any better ways to do this, you would be doing me a huge favor. Please put something down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, as usual, if this was useful, I plan to do, a lot more videos like this, going more in depth into my Google App Script course, as well as I'm also starting putting some videos together using Python, particularly pandas and NumPy, in order to how to work with data as well. So if this was useful, if you found this interesting, by all means, subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. I'd really appreciate it. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.